The blizzard came down from the Rockies like a curse loosed by God himself, sudden and merciless, swallowing the Wyoming plains in a wall of white so thick it erased fences, roads, and even the horizon. Elias Crow had lived on that land long enough to recognize when the weather meant business, and this storm meant death to anything foolish enough to be caught outside. He reined his black stallion hard, the animal snorting steam into the frozen air as snow lashed sideways, stinging Elias's face through his beard. He had gone out only because one of his hired hands hadn't returned from checking the south pasture before dusk, and Elias didn't believe in leaving men or animals to the mercy of the cold. The Crow Ranch sprawled across thousands of acres, earned through grit, smart cattle deals, and a past Elias never spoke of, but wealth didn't buy mercy from winter. As he scanned the white void ahead, something dark lay half-buried near the fence line, separating his land from his nearest. Neighbors spread. A man named Vernon Hale. Elias narrowed his eyes, heart tightening in a way he didn't expect, and swung down from his horse, boots crunching through knee-deep snow as the wind screamed like a living thing. What he found there was not a fallen calf or a broken post, but a woman collapsed, unmoving, her thin coat no match for the storm. Dark hair plastered to her frozen face, lips tinged blue. She should have been dead. Elias dropped to his knees, ignoring the way ice burned his skin through his gloves, and pressed his ear to her chest. At first he heard nothing, then barely a flutter, so faint it might have been his imagination. He swore under his breath, shrugging out of his coat and wrapping it around her, lifting her slight body with careful strength. She weighed almost nothing, as if hunger had already taken its share before the cold tried to finish the job. Her hands were raw and cracked, fingers curled stiffly as though she'd crawled before collapsing. The fence beside them told the story in pieces, torn fabric, caught on barbed wire, footprints filled with drifting snow, a path leading away from the Hale ranch house and straight into the storm. Elias knew Vernon Hale well enough to know this wasn't an accident. Hale was a bitter man, known for his temper and his debts, and Elias remembered the rumors drifting through town weeks earlier, something about a mail order, bride arriving from back east, maybe even from overseas, meant to save Hale from loneliness and ruin. Elias had dismissed it as gossip then. Now with this half-frozen woman in his arms, the truth cut sharper than the wind. He mounted his horse with difficulty, balancing her against his chest, shielding her face as best he could, and turned back toward the lights of his ranch house glowing faintly through the storm. Every step felt like a gamble against fate, but Elias had survived worse than weather, and he wasn't about to let a defenseless woman die on his land. By the time he reached the house, his hands were numb, his jaw clenched against fear he hadn't felt in years. Inside, warmth rushed at them, and he carried her straight to the kitchen table, barking orders to the housekeeper to fetch blankets, hot water, anything. As they worked to bring her back from the edge, Elias noticed details that made his chest tighten further. The cheap wedding band cutting into her swollen finger, the bruises half hidden beneath her sleeves, the way she flinched even while unconscious, as though cruelty had taught her not to rest. When her eyes finally fluttered open, dark and frightened, she tried to pull away, whispering something he couldn't understand through chattering teeth. Elias leaned close, voice low and steady, the way he spoke to frightened horses. "You're safe," he said. "I swear it. You're safe here." And though she didn't yet believe him, the storm outside raged on, as if angry that it had failed to claim her life. She woke hours later in a bed far too soft for the life she'd been living, staring at a ceiling made of polished wood instead of peeling boards. For a moment, panic seized her, sharp and familiar, and she tried to sit up too fast, gasping as pain flared through her frozen limbs. A hand appeared instantly, steadying her shoulder, firm but gentle. "Easy," a deep voice said. "You're still warming up." She turned her head slowly and saw him, the man who had carried her out of the storm. He was big in the way of men who worked hard rather than showed off. Dark hair threaded with silver at the temples, eyes the color of wet earth after rain, There was no hunger in his gaze, no anger either, just concern and something else she couldn't place. She swallowed, heart hammering. Where am I?" she whispered. "Crow Ranch," he answered. "Name's Elias Crow. You wandered onto my land in a blizzard. Care to tell me why?" Her name, she eventually told him, was Anya Petrova. She spoke with an accent softened by fear and exhaustion, words chosen carefully, as if each one might be used against her. She had come to America on promises written in letters that spoke of opportunity, protection, and marriage. Vernon Hale's letters had been polite, even tender, full of hope for a future together on the frontier. The reality, she admitted in halting fragments over cups of broth and long silences, had been something else entirely. Hale drank, he raged. He blamed her for his failures, for the drought, for the debts, for the way his neighbors looked down on him. When she tried to leave, he laughed and reminded her she had nowhere to go. No money, no family within 1,000 miles. The storm had been her chance, mad, desperate, but better than staying. Elias listened without interrupting, jaw tightening, fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. He had known men like Hale his whole life, had fought hard not to become one of them. When Anya finished, she stared down at her hands, voice breaking. "I thought dying in the snow would hurt less." Elias stood then, turning away so she wouldn't see the fury in his eyes. He had wealth, land, power in that county, and none of it meant a damn thing if he let injustice pass by his door. "You're not going back there," he said finally, voice like stone. "Not ever." She looked up, startled. "But he's my husband," she said weakly. Elias met her gaze without flinching. "Not if you don't choose him," he replied. "And even if the law says otherwise, no man gets to beat, starve, or abandon a woman on my watch." Outside, the storm began to weaken, but something heavier settled between them, a truth neither could ignore. By saving her life, Elias Crow had drawn a line that would not go. Unanswered days passed as the snow melted, and Anya slowly regained her strength. She helped in the kitchen, fed the chickens, and moved through the ranch house with quiet gratitude, always careful not to take up too much space. Elias watched her from a distance at first, aware of how easily kindness could be mistaken for obligation. He learned small things about her, how she sang softly while working, melodies from a homeland she missed fiercely, how she startled at raised voices, how she stood a little straighter each day as warmth and regular meals restored what had been taken from her. Word reached town quickly, as it always did. Vernon Hale came once, red-faced and shouting at the edge of the property, demanding his wife back. Elias met him at the gate, calm and immovable as the mountains behind him. "She's staying," he said simply. Hale threatened the law. Elias nodded. "You do that." Hale never did. Everyone knew Crow money and Crow reputation carried weight, and some fights weren't worth starting. But safety came with its own complications. Late one night, as the fire burned low, Anya confessed what truly haunted her, not fear of Hale, but fear of being a burden, of owing a debt she could never repay. Elias surprised her by laughing softly. "You don't owe me a thing," he said. "I didn't save you for payment." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw loneliness etched deep beneath his strength. A man who had built an empire but come home each night to silence. Something fragile and dangerous stirred between them, unspoken but undeniable. The storm had brought her to his door, but it was the quiet after that threatened to change them both forever. And as winter loosened its grip on the land, neither Elias Crow nor Anya Petrova could pretend their lives would ever return to what they had been before. Spring did not arrive gently that year. It crept across the plains with mud and tension, as if the land itself sensed unfinished business. Anya felt it first in the way Elias grew quieter, his attention pulled outward toward fences, ledgers, and the low murmur of town, gossip that reached even the Crow Ranch. She had begun to feel something dangerously close to peace, waking without fear, working with purpose, laughing in small, surprised bursts that startled her as much as they did Elias. But peace, she knew too well, was fragile. It shattered the morning a deputy rode up the long, drive with official papers in his hand and unease written across his face. Vernon Hale had finally acted. He claimed abandonment. He claimed theft of property, his wife. He claimed Elias Crowe had used his wealth to interfere with a lawful marriage. Elias read the documents once, then folded them carefully, his expression unreadable. "It's all right," he told Anya when he saw the color drain from her face. "This doesn't change anything." But she heard what he didn't say, that it would change everything. The hearing was set in town, and the days leading up to it stretched tight as wire. Vernon made sure his presence was felt. Drunken boasts in the saloon. Ugly rumors whispered to anyone who would listen. Some said Anya had seduced Elias for comfort. Others said Elias planned to buy her freedom like cattle. Each lie cut deep, reopening wounds Anya had barely begun to heal. One night, unable to bear the thought of being the cause of Elias's trouble, she packed her few belongings and prepared to leave before dawn. She was nearly at the door when Elias found her, standing there with her coat clutched in shaking hands. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask permission. He simply took the bag from her hand and set it aside. "Running almost killed you once," he said quietly. "I won't let it do it again." She broke then. Years of fear spilling out in sobs she could no longer hold back. And Elias held her as if she were something precious rather than fragile. The day of the hearing, the town packed the small courthouse. Vernon arrived loud and confident, certain the law would favor him. Elias arrived calm, impeccably dressed, a man who knew both power and restraint. Anya sat between them like a living truth neither side could ignore. When she spoke, her voice trembled at first, then steadied as she told her story, not of romance or rescue, but of hunger, cruelty, and a blizzard she had chosen over another night of despair. The room fell silent. Even Vernon could not laugh it away. By the end, the judge ruled what everyone with a conscience already knew. A marriage built on abuse held no authority. Anya was free. Vernon stormed out, ruined in reputation if not yet in pride. Outside, the spring sun broke through the clouds, and Anya stood blinking in the light, hardly daring to believe it was real. Freedom, Anya learned, came with its own fear, without the shadow of Vernon looming over her. She was forced to face the truth she had tried to avoid. What she felt for Elias was no longer simple gratitude. It was deep, aching, and terrifying. Elias, for his part, wrestled with a lifetime of restraint. He had saved her life, yes, but loving her meant risking her trust, risking the careful balance he had tried to maintain. He feared becoming another man who claimed ownership rather than offering choice. Weeks passed in careful politeness, both circling the truth without touching it. It was Anya who finally broke the silence one evening as they watched the sun sink behind the hills, painting the sky gold. "You don't look at me like a debt," she said softly. "You look at me like a question." Elias turned to her then, all pretense gone. "Because I won't be another cage," he said. "If you stay, it has to be because you choose me. Not because you owe me. Not because you're afraid." Her answer came not in words but in action. She reached for his hand, hesitant but sure, and rested it over her heart. "I choose," she said simply. The kiss they shared was slow and reverent, built not from desperation but from understanding. In that moment, Elias realized something wealth had never taught him, that love was not something to be earned or bought, but something freely given, or not at all. News traveled fast, but this time the whispers carried warmth instead of suspicion. The ranch hands noticed the change. The way laughter lingered longer in the house. The way Elias seemed lighter, less burdened by ghosts. Anya began to dream again, not of escape, but of building something lasting, something real. They married in early summer, not in a grand church or crowded hall, but beneath the wide Wyoming sky, with the land itself as witness. There were no extravagant displays, only honest vows spoken clearly and without fear. Anya wore a simple dress she had sewn herself, and Elias stood tall beside her. A man who had learned that true wealth lay not in acres or cattle, but in the courage to protect and the humility to love. Vernon Hale left town soon after, his story ending not with vengeance, but with quiet irrelevance, a fitting fate for a man who had tried to own what was never his to claim. Years later, people would still tell the story of the blizzard, the night a millionaire. Cowboy rode into the storm and came back with more than a life saved. They spoke of the Crow Ranch as a place where broken things were not discarded, but mended. Anya never forgot the snow or the fear, but it no longer haunted her. It reminded her of how close she had come to vanishing, and how fiercely she had been chosen instead. And Elias, standing beside her on the porch as the seasons turned, knew one unshakable truth, that finding her half dead in the storm had not been an accident of weather, but the moment his lonely life finally found its purpose.